A flat tax is a system in which everyone pays the same percentage of their income, something like 15%. So whether you make $1 million or $10,000, you pay 15% of that. Obviously, the total number varies, but the percentage remains the same. Many people, primarily conservatives, have proposed moving from our current progressive tax system, a progressive tax system, of course, being a system where the rich pay a higher percentage of their income than the poor, to a flat tax. So let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of implementing a flat tax. One of the biggest benefits a flat tax would provide is its simplicity. Flat taxes would come with no loopholes or deductions or things like that. There'd be no brackets or anything else. You would just pay 15% or 10% or 20%, whatever it was set at, of your income. It'd be very easy to calculate. There'd be really no need for tax returns. There'd be very little need for the IRS. There would still have to be somebody who processes this money. You couldn't entirely eliminate that, but you wouldn't need a huge task force to audit people's taxes, things like that, because it'd just be so much simpler. And that also saves some administrative costs, both for the government from eliminating parts of the IRS, and for people, because right now, especially if you have income from multiple sources, maybe you own your own business, things like that, it's likely that your taxes are very complicated, and at the very least, you'll need a tax professional like H&R Block or something like that to go in and help you with your taxes, and you may even need a full-on legal team as you start to get into more complicated and larger businesses to sort of go over your taxes and make sure you're paying what you need to pay, but also not wasting a huge amount of money by overpaying. Another big pro of a flat tax is that it would eliminate loopholes in the tax code. You've probably heard about wealthy people and corporations not paying any taxes, and the main way they do this is by exploiting various loopholes that allow them to not pay any taxes. And all of these loopholes are built into the current convoluted tax system we have right now. So moving to a flat tax would eliminate all of these things and make it so that everyone, no matter what, was paying their 10% or whatever it is. Now switching over and looking at the cons, the biggest con is that it's going to increase the burden on lower income individuals. In order to get to a flat tax from a progressive tax like what we have in the United States, you have to raise up the taxes that the poorest Americans are paying while also lowering down the taxes that the rich are paying. So it's somewhat of a double whammy there, where the rich, who can afford to pay more, end up getting a tax break, and the poor end up having to pay more taxes than they used to. And this is one of the largest pieces of opposition to a flat tax, is how it would harm the poor. And within this, there's another issue of deductions. Our tax code has a lot of deductions, and while these deductions are sometimes loopholes for wealthy people and corporations, many of them are actually targeted at average Americans. For instance, you get to deduct income from your taxable income for children, and that is extremely helpful for parents, especially single parents, who obviously have a much higher base expenditure than individuals without children, and where the burden of having to pay more taxes would be much harder on them and on their children as well. So creating a flat tax eliminates the flexibility in our tax code to help those individuals out. And now a final note on this is that the reality is a progressive tax bracket system does make our tax code a little bit more complicated, but it doesn't really make it all that much more complicated. You wouldn't need a lawyer or even an H&R Block if all we had was a progressive tax system. And pretty much anyone with a high school education can very easily calculate their tax burden with a progressive tax system, and there are tons of calculators that can do that as well. The thing that makes our tax code so complicated is all of the deductions and loopholes and other special rules that have been applied to the tax code over time that are trying to extend benefits to certain groups and in some cases penalize other groups. That's really what makes it more complicated. So you can get a lot of the initial benefits I talked about while also eliminating the first con I mentioned by simply eliminating any sort of loopholes, deductions, special rules, and just having progressive tax brackets with no deductions or anything else. Because that allows you to eliminate a large part of the IRS. It allows you to eliminate things like H&R Block, and you can largely eliminate tax law as a profession of law. And you would eliminate loopholes that the wealthy people can use to avoid paying their taxes, as they currently do. But you also maintain a lower burden for lower income individuals, so they're much more likely to be able to actually pay that, while also taking in more money from the wealthy who have more money to pay. The only thing you do still lose with that is your ability to be flexible based around people's life situations, so you can't give a deduction to people with children. Now, obviously, the ideal tax code, at least in my view, is like that, except keeping some of those critical deductions. It's just really hard in our current political environment, especially, to create a tax code that allows for deductions and other exemptions that can't be exploited by the wealthy, or where the wealthy are unable to lobby the government and get a special deduction or exemption for themselves put into the law. But ultimately that is more a problem of our politics than anything specifically about tax policy. So let us know what you think about a flat tax in the comments below, and like and subscribe to learn more.